With the release of Unguarded a few weeks back, it didn't take long for critics to label the book as a rather salty experience. And while it's not exactly regarded as one of the greats, it's undoubtedly had a few shocking moments that fans would love to know about. So what are the various topics discussed in the hard-hitting memoir, and what are some of the craziest moments throughout? For all this and more, stay tuned. 1. Scottie Pippen wasn't the best player in the league back then. First of all, we have to talk about the man Scottie Pippen was on the court, as this is what the majority of the memoir discusses. You see, many fans still regard Pippen as the greatest player of all time, despite the fact that he shared his success with the incredible Michael Jordan. Physically speaking, he had everything a defensive player needed on the court. It's not just that he had the build of a fantastic defender, though. With a massive frame and some of the largest arms in the league, he was also a tough player who never let a member of the opposing team get up in his face. And it's this defensive nature of his that really solidified his position on the Chicago Bulls. According to Pippen, his coach would constantly give him new targets in a game in an effort to take the opposing team by surprise. Whether his target was a big, wing, or guard, it really didn't matter. Scottie could pretty much defend them all, and by far one of the most shocking revelations from Unguarded is the fact that Pippen was far from the best player in the league. He admits that he was an absolute beast when it came to defensive performance, but in the sector of attack, there's no doubt that Michael Jordan took the cake. Not exactly a shocking statement for Jordan fans, but there's no doubt that this statement took Pippen fans by surprise. 2. His salty review of The Last Dance. That wasn't the moment that made headlines, though. After the release of the book, many readers found themselves shocked by the statements made by Pippen about Michael Jordan and how he was portrayed in The Last Dance. For those of you who don't know, The Last Dance is an ESPN documentary that launched in the midst of lockdown. Since live sport wasn't being played at that time, basketball fans found themselves desperate to go back to a time when the NBA was in full swing. So when ESPN released this anticipated documentary, which was described as being the exploration of the life and times of Michael and the Chicago Bulls, you can just imagine how many viewers watched every single second from the edge of their seats. Not only did it remind them of a simpler time, it also revolved around the greatest basketball player of all time. But as it turns out, not everyone was happy about the way the documentary had been set up. Scottie Pippen was especially riled up and went on to discuss his feelings by giving an unexpected review of the documentary in Unguarded. According to him, each and every episode was exactly the same. The series did its best to put Michael Jordan on a pedestal, which unsurprisingly gave the impression that he got to where he was without any help. In the words of Pippen, this couldn't have been further from the truth, though. Suffice to say, he was sick of being ignored. Scottie Pippen discusses his true feelings. After The Last Dance had finished its 10-episode runtime, Pippen went on to receive a text from Jordan himself, who went on to ask whether Pippen was okay. Jordan had apparently heard that Pippen wasn't too happy about the documentary and went on to ask whether he wanted to talk about it. Since Pippen knew that the conversation was going to take a while, though, he put it off until the next day. But how could Michael be blamed for a documentary that he hadn't created himself? Well, according to Pippen, he had actually been given creative control over the final product, and for this reason deserved a portion of the blame. It's not just that, though. The sentiments expressed by the documentary appeared to come right out of Jordan's own mouth. It expressed the same sentiments he shared way back when, after all. You see, Pippen thought that Jordan was far too arrogant. Rather than giving his teammates their fair due, he saw himself as a god on the court and expressed the idea that he could do anything on his own. So the fact that The Last Dance glorified Michael and forgot about the rest of the team involved in the 1997-98 championship season was a real knife in the back for Pippen. Last but not least, Pippen went on to say that Michael is trying to appear greater than he was back then in an attempt to come off as better than LeBron James. Ouch. 3. The Tony Kukoc incident that infuriated him further. Another revelation that Unguarded brought to fans of Pippen is the intense nature of the beef he had with Phil Jackson over the years. Remember, Jackson was the head coach of the Chicago Bulls and as such made all the decisions regarding who would be playing and what strategies would be used in upcoming games. After Michael Jordan had taken his leave from the team, Pippen knew that this was going to be his time to shine. No longer hidden by the shadow of someone he clearly had a lot to say about, he wanted to try his best to become a true great of the game. But that's when Jackson made a call that he didn't agree with. The coach brought on Tony Kukoc and surprisingly put him in the leadership position that Pippen so desperately wanted. In his own words, Tony was a rookie with no rings. I was in my 7th year with 3 rings. Are you serious? But that's not where it all ended. You see, the dynamic between Pippen and Jackson had really fallen with the departure of Jordan. The head coach apparently humiliated Pippen by telling him that when he throws the ball in bounds only to land on the floor, at least then he can be a decoy for the opposing team. Not exactly something that the best defensive player in the league wants to hear from his coach, and that's why Pippen made the decision to get out while he could. His lashing out at Phil Jackson that labeled the coach a racist. Jackson's decision to bring Kukoc in the position that Pippen wanted triggered something that he had never felt before. According to him, he needed to find find a way to understand why this decision had been made. He had been the one helping the Bulls to victories over the years after all. And although Jordan had received the majority of the fame and fortune from this incredible championship run, if there's anyone who knew how crucial the rest of the team were, it would have been Jackson. And so Pippen went on to call his head coach a racist. And as you can imagine, this had quite a few consequences stemming from it. But if there's one thing we should take from Unguarded, it's that nothing could have been further from the truth. Pippen has used his memoir to finally clear the air, putting an end to this allegation and ensuring that Jackson is no longer regarded as the type of person Pippen described when he was clearly too angry to speak with civility. It's not that he lied, though. In his own words, "I told myself at the time that Phil's decision must have been racially motivated, and I allowed myself to believe that lie for nearly 30 years. And funny enough, it was the writing of his memoir and reflection back on his history that made him realize just how wrong this initial assumption was. So at least something great came from its publication." 4. A possible truce with Isaiah Thomas. But it looks like Pippen wasn't about to forgive everyone that had wronged him in the past. After watching The Last Dance through clenched teeth, he came to realize just how terribly Isaiah Thomas had come off in the documentary. It might have been true that he and the rest of the Bulls were somewhat ignored, but Thomas's true colors were definitely shown. For those of you who don't know, Pippen and Thomas have never really gotten along and have been beefing ever since they faced one another on the court. And if Pippen is to be believed, Thomas saw just how negatively he had been portrayed in the documentary and got in touch with BJ Armstrong in an attempt to smooth things over. Armstrong then went on to contact Pippen, asking whether he would be willing to squash his beef with BJ and let bygones be bygones. Unfortunately for Armstrong, though, Pippen was having none of it. In his memoir, he states that BJ had never been kind to him, so there's no way he was going to help him out, a hole he had dug himself into. Brutal. And there you have it. Some of the most shocking moments from Scottie Pippen's own Unguarded memoir. What was your favorite moment? And do you intend on reading the book in the future? Feel free to let us know in the comment section down below.